What is going on, guys? Blink here, back with a new guide. In this guide, I'll explain another peeking method to utilize and the proper way of pushing opponents with your floors. Also, the V-Bucks giveaway is still going on, so make sure to visit the link in the description to enter. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications as I post an Amazon gift card code in the comments every time I upload. By turning on notifications, you'll have a way better chance of getting here first and redeeming that code. Anyways, guys, let's get to this guide. So, in this first situation, every time I built, I never added a wall to my right and had the right side peeking angle exposed. This is a great way of peeking your opponent quickly if he's pretty close. There are a few reasons on why you should incorporate this peeking method into your playstyles. These few reasons are that you'll be able to expose less to your body, pre-line up your crosshair easier as you peek in and out for a shorter amount of time, and be more prepared to build again if your opponent gets closer. A lot of the times you're told to build a box around you so you don't get shot from the side by someone else. Now, that's true if you think you'll be in the same spot for a while, or there's another player somewhere farther from you and you weren't sure where he was. Then your best bet will be to box yourself in until you can figure out where that other player is. If you figure out where that other player is, then you can still utilize this method of peeking as long as your stairs are pointing towards that farther player. That way you avoid being exposed. When using this peeking method, it makes it more comfortable to pre-line up a shot, and the main goal is to eliminate your opponent quickly. If he's super close, it's super effective instead of boxing yourself in and running on the edge of your walls. I used to have this habit of instantly walling myself up and then jumping around the edge of my walls to try finding my opponent. You're exposing basically your whole body as you jump around finding your opponent. You're basically trying to balance yourself from not falling because you're on such a thin surface. It's just not a comfortable way of fighting. So when should you add those walls? And you want to wall yourself in if you're not moving much or you're on the same platform for too long. The whole point of this peeking method is to give you an easier angle to pre-peek while being mobile. If you notice yourself on the same platform looking for your opponents not moving for like over 10 seconds, then box yourself in. This usually applies to when you're fighting opponents that are farther too. If you figured out you're going to wait for a potential sniping opportunity, so at that moment you box yourself in. If you figured out you're going to take a few shots and keep moving, then there's no need to box yourself in. So let me show you another example of executing this peeking method. Once again, this player was close and right under me. I'm able to see his every move and put some damage onto him because I don't have walls around me. Use that right side peeking angle to get a solid pre-lineup onto my opponent. Once again, if your opponent's farther or you know you're not going to be moving around a lot, then add those walls for support. Another thing I want to mention is that this method of peeking is pretty common during building battles. When you're in a building battle, you're always mobile, so you won't usually add full walls around you because you need to keep track of your opponent and have that crosshair ready. So let me show you guys a building example of this. There was an opponent right above me and I had to try climbing back to the high ground, so I built up and I was able to grab it back. As I did that, you can see I'm not adding any walls behind me or to my left because I know I'll be mobile the whole time I'm fighting. I'm keeping all my focus on this opponent right now because if I had walls every time I was behind my stairs, I might miss out on a nice peeking angle and that second might allow my opponent to get above me. Now at the end, you can see I had a wall to my left because I wasn't moving too much, and I expect myself to potentially be sitting in the spot for a bit to try replacing his wall with mine or squeezing some shots onto my opponent. Luckily, I was able to finish him pretty quickly. So I'll show you guys one last building example. I push onto this opponent, and once again, after peeking him with my stairs, I don't add any walls because I might potentially have a good angle to peek my opponent. As you guys see, I pull out my LMG and spray him down. Never added walls and got the elimination. Now, this was a pretty funky fight as I was testing out the new LMG. My best bet would have been to use the shotgun in this scenario, especially when your opponent is super close. So remember, when utilizing this method of peeking, you gotta make sure you're always mobile and your opponent's nearby. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about is how to properly push an opponent with your floors. So I was able to snipe this player, and to get closer to him without building too high, I used floors. Now, when you push players with floors, especially if they aren't close or you're pretty high up, then you want to push with at least 2 floors side by side just like I am. You do this to avoid your opponent breaking 1 floor and then you end up falling to your death. The more floors you add as you push, the better it is. If you can add 3, then add 3 if you like. Although 2 is usually perfectly fine as I utilize it myself. Now, you can also push with 1 depending on the situation. In this example, I wasn't at risk of taking fall damage and my opponent was still building, so I'm pretty confident in the push. When you push with 1, it takes less time and you won't get caught out on the push. Once again, I wasn't at risk of taking any fall damage and my opponent wasn't paying attention. If I was at risk of taking some serious fall damage but my opponent was still pretty close, I'd probably push with double force to avoid getting them shot out. So I'll continue this clip because this fight shows most of the stuff I've talked about for the past few days. So I ended up getting shot from behind and built some walls as I fought my first opponent. Eliminated him, and I noticed the second player was going for that high ground and already had it. They were directly above me. When you're pretty low and your opponent's directly above you, then you want to double staircase it the rest of the way to avoid taking damage from above. I was able to get above my opponent and I instantly built back to the material platform. Remember a few guides ago where I explained to build back to the middle of all the support so you avoid falling to your death? As I did that, this opponent shot out my materials and I fell right on top of the main platforms because I built right back to them. If I stayed where I was, I would have fell to my death. So I had the high ground above my opponent and destroyed her structure as I added a double wall to avoid getting shot in the face. Sometimes your opponent will try pulling out his weapon as he falls and will will try to shoot you. That double wall would have prevented any sort of shots just in case my opponent had her weapon out, because as you guys see, when she shot my platforms down, I had my shotgun out for that split second. So she ended up taking fall damage and I was able to maneuver my way around to get the kill. So let me show you guys one last stair push example. This one has much more opponent aggression and you don't want to get caught out in the open when you're stair pushing. So I was able to knock down one of my opponents, and usually when I'm pretty low to the ground, I'll push with one platform to get to my opponents quicker, because my train of thought is that his teammate's going for the revive and I'll be able to catch him reviving. Now his teammate did end up peeking out, so the next step is to add those double stairs, and you also need to add double ramps and double walls. It's harder to do, but it's crucial when pushing opponents on your own floors. You can see my opponent was able to shoot out one of my floors and my stairs, but it never stopped my push because he doesn't have time to shoot out both sides, and I was easily able to push him for that elimination. Now had I built just one floor, one stair, and one wall, I'd probably get my materials destroyed and I'd probably take some nice fall damage. So to conclude this duo pushing example, if you know one of the players are down and you can't clearly see your opponent, then try going for the one floor push for a quicker push. If your opponent shoots back, then you know he's not reviving, so your next step is to add that two floor push as you add ramps and walls to avoid taking damage and getting your material shot out. It might be hard to do at first, but it's pretty easy to do after a bit of practice. Well guys, that's it for this guide. Hopefully I've helped some of you guys out with this video, and a like and a sub would be greatly appreciated as it does help me out a lot. Anyways guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or night, and I'll see you on the next one.